Sam Hartman speaking on the small human factors of great things. And we're ready to go.
Great. So, hi, I'm Sam Hartman. I guess these days, among other things, I'm the Debian project leader, although I'm speaking very much as an individual, not in any official capacity. In the past, I was the chief technologist at the MIT Kerberos Consortium, and I spent a term as a security area director of the Internet Engineering Task Force. Apparently that's a popular SIPB position. There have been 3 of us. One of the current area directors is actually a SIPB member. But so, you know, I've done a number of things, and in a lot of crowds, I have sufficient technical chops to really hold my own. And when I got to MIT, that was actually kind of a really important thing. As Jeff was talking about sort of the negativity. And I think I'm going to be focusing on that a fair bit. When I got here, the web was just coming in. There wasn't really search engines. And I think there was a culture where sounding confident and being plausible actually got you further than being right. That during my time as an undergraduate, it became easy enough to check your facts that you really could no longer get away with a certain amount of bluster that was pretty commonplace when I first got here. Because if you actually were consistently proven wrong as opposed to, well, that's not quite right, but if you were just actually dead wrong, eventually that would catch up with you. But it was still very much a culture of assertiveness, and dominance was a particular part of actually being taken seriously in SIPB and in the MIT of my day. And I'm going to talk to you about how I came to my personal journey of a kindler, gentler, I don't know, not necessarily SIPB, because this has been much bigger in my life. And why I think that's really important, and why I think perhaps it's time for us to evaluate whether we should be making some changes in some of that negativity that Jeff was talking about, and in whether it really is important to be able to be the one who has the first answer, or to be able to be the one who's able to show up the speaker and demonstrate that they've missed some factor that you cleverly pointed out to them. For myself, I really started thinking about teams and how to build them in my first startup, which happened rather concurrently with being an undergraduate. Back then, I think we were trying to build an online shopping site in the mid-90s. We actually ended up pivoting to online banking because it turned out that banks paid their bills a lot better than people trying to sell boots on the internet in the mid-90s. But we had, there were some business people in the company, but they kind of left the engineering team such as it was. I was, one of the more experienced engineers as a freshman and sophomore at MIT. Mostly to themselves, and we kind of self-organized. And I think because I was coming from the MIT culture where that dominance and assertiveness was a thing that got you further, I'd started doing that and was, in effect, de facto becoming the team leader. And I enjoyed that, and I was good at it. But one of my coworkers came to me and said, "Why should you be the team leader? Why is that the right thing to go forward? I'm not really comfortable with that." I thought about what Charles said, and I realized that politically I probably actually could have won that battle. That I could have said, well, I think I'm actually good at this, and I'm going to go forward. And probably if he'd complained to management, I would have won that solution, or won that battle. But I would have lost in the long run because he was a great engineer. He was someone I really enjoyed working with. And so for the first time, I started thinking about how do I actually succeed in making a team that's going to be good for both of us? How do I build both of us up as a team? And I came up with something which, today I would describe as consensus-based decision-making. We actually had an appeals process because we were smart enough to realize that actually sometimes in business there are decisions you need to get made, and coming and building a consensus really isn't the right way to solve everything if you need a decision now. Although, because we had the appeals process, we actually basically never ended up needing to use it until the team was about 40, 50 people, and by that point, we did actually have a more complicated structure. But it was so exciting to actually come up with a way of solving a problem, and I got to be happy, and he got to be happy too, and as a result, we had a better team. And that started me thinking about it. And so that was my first experience in how do I actually make this team better, even if that doesn't mean I'm in charge, even if that doesn't mean I'm seen as the alpha geek. Another experience happened that's actually kind of amusing when Jeff talks about negativity. There was this freshman, by this point I was working for MIT ISNT, working on Kerberos, and there was this freshman who comes up to me, and he's really enthusiastic, and he's going to solve this problem of having hosted web scripts for people. And I sighed, and I was like, well, I guess I could just tell him, no, that's really, you're not going to succeed at that. But he was so enthusiastic, and I really didn't want to, I wanted to encourage SIPB. I didn't want to drive people away. And I didn't want to see people get their bubbles burst. And so I tried something that I'd seen done before of, well, it's a hard problem. Let me tell you why it's hard. And figuring that, like most of the people who thought about the problem before, he would come to the conclusion, yeah, okay, that's more effort than I can really spend. Well, that was an interesting learning exercise. So a couple months later, Jeff comes to me and says, so I've got the solution. The solution for what, Jeff? For the web scripts thing. Interesting. Want to explain your idea. And it turns out that the thing Jeff had done is he thought about the problem differently. We'd always been assuming that MIT security was distributed in that day. And you had a network model of who you were that was basically consistent with your local model of who you were. And you could and so Scripps was hard because you either needed to get a system that was really trusted, ridiculously so for what it was doing, that was effectively entrusted to impersonate any MIT user, or you needed to have a huge political battle and get MIT to issue like lots and lots of accounts for all the potential scripts and deal with matching accounts up and access control and out, that sort of things. But I realized that Jeff had violated an unstated assumption, which is that the local security needed to be the same as the network security. And as I started thinking about that assumption, I realized that the reason I hadn't stated the assumption because it wasn't actually a requirement. And so I was absolutely convinced when I explained to Jeff why Scripps was hard, that he wasn't going to solve it. But because I wanted to build a better team and to build a better SIPB, I decided to try and encourage things going forward. And I decided not to basically, show off that I knew that it couldn't be done, and instead to let Jeff learn and explore with it, and, maybe I'd be wrong. It turns out in that instance, I really was. Now, Jeff is, a motivated enough person that if I had told him, oh, this is impossible, he quite possibly wouldn't have believed me and might have done scripts anyway. But I actually suspect that trying to be, somewhat encouraging, to be honest about what the requirements were, and they weren't easy, but, to actually outline what the requirements were, probably created a more encouraging environment than just, no, a lot of really good people have thought about that. It's not going to work. And that was one of one of those situations that really shocked and amazed me at how, by believing in people and giving them an opportunity to succeed, I managed to set a bunch of things in motion that were really amazing to watch as they unfolded. A few years before, I had actually had a similar experience, which is one of the moments in my life where I realized that this whole assertiveness thing isn't how I choose to be. There was someone who'd been sort of flaming on a mailing list in Kerberos standardization. It was getting really frustrating for several of us because we clearly weren't seeing eye to eye with this person. And I decided that, you know, I wanted this person to go away. Back then, I was actually being pretty typically MIT. But I knew that politically I couldn't just say, hey, get lost. So instead I said, hey, this is very complicated, and I think that to proceed, it would be best if you were to show up at one of our face-to-face meetings and present your ideas there. Pretty sure that the person who never made it to one of the face-to-face meetings wasn't actually going to be able to succeed in doing that. And in saying this, I'm really kind of embarrassed that I had behaved that way. It wasn't really a very nice thing to do. But it showed the pretense of being nice and inclusive. And a chair wrote and said, hey, that would be great. And I think all of us were assuming that would be the end of that. Except this person took those two messages, showed them to their management, and said, hey, these people really want me to contribute. I bet it would look good for our company if I were to show up. And they got permission to show up. And, you know, once I heard that the person was coming, I'm like, well, okay, he took me up on it. It's my job to now actually give it a chance. The first day of the meeting was rough, and then I spent until about 9 p.m. with this person in the SIPB office, having kind of okay, let's actually get on the same page and understand each other. And by the end of that time, we actually understood each other and had gotten onto the same page. And the next morning, we totally rocked that meeting. So much so that some engineers from Sun sitting in the room watched this guy who'd come in, you know, with his sysadmin job that he wasn't happy with. And were so impressed with his performance that they gave him a job offer, and he eventually became a key contributor to Solaris and then went on to a bunch of other cool things. Again, basically, yeah, that time my initial motivation perhaps hadn't been so good, but because I was willing to follow through with it and give someone a chance once they took up, I managed to change someone's life and actually allow them to be great and allow them to totally expand their horizons. And, you know, I'm disappointed that my motivations were what they were, but I'm excited that I managed to do that for someone and that I managed to kind of get shown up that no, actually, when you believe in people, there are a lot of times where they will rise to that. How am I doing on time? 8 minutes. Huh? 8 minutes. 8 minutes, okay. So I'm going to close with, in terms of prepared content, I'll close with one other vignette, which is since then I've been working on really trying to figure out how to build teams. And in fact, that's what I'm doing in Debian, is I'm actually trying to teach that community about how to engage how to bring feelings and emotional needs into deliberations about technical issues, and how to build a sensible, sustainable community that can take technical things into account, but can also take the social context into account, and can heal from tough, complicated technical discussions. One of the things I learned along the way is the importance of actually carefully listening to people and understanding what they've actually said and what they haven't said. There's kind of a SIPB story behind that. So I was working at IS&T, a manager, and I'd been asked to facilitate cooperation between SIPB and IS&T. And IS&T had basically realized that their Red Hat port really wasn't where they wanted to be going. And they kind of wanted to do something Debian-based. And SIPB already had Debathena that was, reasonably successful at this point. We had this meeting, and it was, Tim Abbott, myself, and a couple of other people. And someone from IS&T had basically said, well, the stuff you've got is good. Just to let you know what we're going to need to do is that we're going to duplicate all your effort. And we're going to focus on our needs only. And, I mean, you can steal our code if you want to, but, we won't be able to take your code. We won't be able to work with you. We won't be able to give you commit access. We'll be doing our own thing. And Tim didn't seem really happy with that answer for some strange reason. I was sitting there going, wait, wow, that's kind of disappointing. But I said, so, is this because you want to duplicate the SIPB work? Is this because you believe that you're going to somehow do a better job or, meet your needs in a way that you couldn't work with the SIPB people? No, not really. So, if you could work with the SIPB Debathena crowd, would you? We'd never get management approval for that. Okay, yeah, but if you could, if you got to choose how this all worked, would you be willing to work with them? Oh yeah, that would be great. It would save a lot of effort. Click, click, click. Dear boss, do we really want to be duplicating the SIPB effort? Didn't think, okay, right, that's what I thought. So no, okay, I've just gotten management approval for us all to work together. Are you sure this is what we want to do? Really? You can get management approval for that? Yeah, all taken care of. Wow, that would be great. And it was one of those things where by carefully listening, and again, it's and rather than trying to assert a solution, but by being open and listening and letting people have the space to say what they needed, I was able to get a much better outcome than I think otherwise would have been possible. And I think my takeaway that I hope you'll consider is that, yes, it's really cool to be able to demonstrate that you know a lot. And yes, it's really cool to be able to be recognized and valued in your community. But for myself, at least, I've found it's even cooler to be able to grow that community and to watch other people blossom and to be able to facilitate that. And I've actually found that doing so, I still get recognized and I still get valued by my community. And I still get, in general, people believe that I actually have technical skill. There have been a couple of cases lately where, some people in Debian are like, wow, Sam's all about the social stuff and probably doesn't have any technical abilities to speak of. And that's okay for them to believe that. And the people who actually need to know, understand what my technical capabilities are. Any questions or comments?
I've got a comment. I would agree with you that over the years, I have learned that management is more about the emotional side of things than actually some of the operational things, because it's easier to hire people who can take care of the operational details, but you have to really worry about the team dynamics that go on.
Actually, I have a question, sort of,
Sure.
from students, current undergrads' perspective. This idea of, sort of the SIPB having this huge knowledge base of people who are really core involved, really centrally involved in a project or whatever, and the sort of ability of the older people to discourage or encourage people. I'm curious how much the culture has changed in terms of, with slightly less alum involvement, is there also less of a risk of sort of discouraging people right off the bat because somebody older tells them not to do something, or how does that dynamic work these days?
We've been making an active effort to change this. So I'm a senior,
That is so awesome to hear, and certainly all of this stuff is a skill. There are like actively things you can learn about how to build communities, how to approach people with empathy, and honestly, I am having as much fun with that as I am with technology these days, is learning that sort of stuff.
I remember in the early days when I got to the beginning, I got concerned that some people in the city seemed to be too enthusiastic about enforcing the rules as opposed to being more relaxed about it. So this is not something new.
Those rules back then can start giving out the money.
Yes, and I'm too jealous about enforcing it. You say it's not even over.
No, I'm aware I'm standing on a cord.
Well, thank you very much.
Want it, I guess is my question, just is it, because
We've been going